Improvements on air traffic control and the airport environment. So let's see if I can get the slides to advance here. There we go. So I've talked about incursions versus excursions. An incursion is any occurrence in an aerodrome involving the incorrect presence of an aircraft, vehicle, or person on protected area of a surface designated for landing and takeoff of aircraft. We just had one up there at Prescott where a gentleman was landing on the taxiway while we had little airplanes that were out there doing crew swaps. Unfortunately, nobody got hurt, but I mean, it was very, very close because they were cleared to taxi down the taxiway just as this Piper Cub came down and landed and disappeared into the hangars very quickly. Definitely that's the definition of an incursion. An excursion is a veer off or overrun from the runways. Right. So on incursions, there's three types. Operational incident is where the controllers messed up. That's an ATC violation. Then we have ones where we mess up, pilot deviations. And that pilot crosses a runway without clearance while en route to an airport or a gate is just an example. If the nose of your airplane so much crosses over the whole runway, whole short line, that is a pilot deviation. Then we have vehicle and pedestrian deviations. We have people all the time going over, and I just heard last month we had 3 Prescott police vehicles that crossed, I'm not sure if it was a taxiway or the runways, but nevertheless they were not given permission to cross the runways, and that created a vehicle and pedestrian deviation without approval from the tower. Right. So this video, hopefully it will play on this presentation. We've got a Southwest flight taxiing out of the gate over here at Terminal 1. This is the present day situation at LAX. At the time, the runway wasn't quite this long. They'd come out, start engines, and they were ready to go. They get cleared for takeoff, and you may be able, actually they're told to in position and hold, which was the precursor to line up and wait that gets used quite frequently these days at the bigger airports. And if you can listen in the background, you'll hear some clearances from the controller to a United flight that's cleared to land on 24 right. This is 24 left. And pay attention to what's happening in the video.
Southwest 440, runway 24 left, position and hold. Relax. Cruise designate. Southwest 440, turn left heading 210, runway 24 left, cleared for takeoff. Yeah, 961 LA, counter crash, May 7747, short final 24 right, cleared to land. Skyway 6040 Los Angeles, counter crash, May turbulence, traffic 4 mile, final 737, runway 24 right, clear to land. Southwest 440, cancel takeoff clearance, hold in position.
Holding in position, Southwest 440.
Asian 204, fighting 250, climb maintain 2000.
Any 250, climb maintain 2000, 204, going on now. That was close.
Yes, that was very close. Now, the last opportunity, the Southwest crew, first officer sitting on that right side of the airplane, when you're cleared to line up and wait or into position to hold as it was at that time, you need to make that look towards the right and make sure that there is nobody out there on short final. If you could hear the local controller is the tower controller. That's what they call the local controller that's working that runway. He got an AMAS alert that there was an airplane approaching the active runway. He had told the United crew there was a 747-400 Heavy on 24 right, clear to land. United, you are cleared to land 24 right. So the controller thought that they were lined up on 24 right and didn't notice that they were lined up on 24 left. So is this an operational incident or a pilot deviation? I would say it's a little bit of both. Definitely the Asiana crew messed up. Go around from that LAX is up to 2,000 feet, turn right direct to Catley intersection at 2,200 feet. So, and that's what they did. All right, so that was the AMAS system that kicked in. It did give the controller, but by the time he said something, it was a little bit too late. And again, the Southwest crew had an opportunity to be the last eyes there to prevent that. And of course, clear to go, first officer's airplane, if it's his leg, and they're just blindly worrying about taking off and making sure that the flight attendants were down. All right, so the AMAS works in the airport movement area safety system. Unfortunately, it did not prevent this incursion. All right, runway incursion at Charlotte. This one we'll get to watch with the ADS-X. And this one, again, you tell me, is this a pilot deviation or a operational incident? And then we'll look at United 448 after that. So AMAS airport movement area, the safety system. This one is the ADS-X, and we'll see what happens here. This is Charlotte. They are landing runway 23, so you'll hear the controller clearing airplanes to land on runway 23, and they're using this runway with Blue Streak. That's one of the commuters flying the RJ200s, waiting down here, and then there's a Pilatus that comes out of the general aviation ramp up here at the top.
Alright, so I'm going to call the 737 ahead of you, taxing wing left, the Edison is dropping. 390 will need 1 minute wait on word from the flight attendant for the cabin. Okay, that's okay. The guy behind him, so have to wait for you anyway, because he's going the other direction. But just call it 737 when you can, taxing wing left. Bridge 1690 after we head open. So 2681, please. On ground, flight 409 Delta, I'm with Delta. Wilton, taxi, wait. 409 Delta, Romeo, slow ground, roger. Runway wing left, expecting intersection departure at Alpha. Hold short of taxiway Romeo on Delta at the crossing track. Okay, we'll take right left at Alpha, move over short of Romeo on Delta. Delta. Okay, 55, cross runway left, turn right on Charlie, hold short of 23. Okay, runway left, right on Charlie, hold short, 23, okay, 55. We did 609, cross runway 18 left, turn right on Charlie, hold short runway 23. Alright, 18 left, we'll cross right on Charlie, short of 23, 609. Well, time to Romeo, taxi, for intersection departure, runway 18 left, intersection out.
So that's exactly what they're doing up here in yellow.
55, cross runway 23.
9 Delta Romeo.
Left, traffic on a 2.5 mile per 23. Austin 23, cut the way, Hawkeye 55. Control 2681, follow the regional sit down again when you pull it out in front of your taxi point.
On the regional 2681.
Push it 390 much longer. No, 390, probably about another 20 seconds, we're calling her now. Okay, thank you. When you're able, taxi 1.
So you're going to hear a change in the controllers.
Hawkeye 55, miles per hour, 1821, have a good day. You want to have a good day, Hawkeye 55. And push it 390, ready for taxi now. Push it 390, taxi 18 left, and switch to power 1811, good. Alright, left and power 390, thank you.
Blue Street 390, Charlotte Town, 18 left, position hold, check depending on my 23.
Position hold, 18 left, push it 390.
Number 907 Delta Kilo, Charlotte Tower, 12908. Runway 23, for the lane, traffic party on my 18 left.
Okay, 23, for Delta Kilo.
Texas 226, runway 5 shot, traffic on plane off runway, traffic 90 speed crossing down filled in.
246, 25, sir.
Texas 1989, heading 180, finding 180 and contact departure.
1989, push. Blue Street 376 with you on the visual country.
Blue Street 390, 12806, my 18 left, set for takeoff.
Take off 18 left, Blue Street 390.
And before turn on about the Romeo, Charlotte Town, 18 left, position hold, traffic landing on my 23.
Position and hold, Delta up here.
Blue Street 276, Charlotte Town, to continue. Captain 1821, you got 5 shots? You will make 5 shots, I just turn right there, traffic to crossing again, contact on plane off runway. Cancel takeoff clearance from Blue Street.
Blue Street 390, rejecting on 18 left.
Blue Street 390, just hold there for a moment.
Up front is exit runway at Delta 6. America 3205, chicken and visual 23. Blue Street 390 is R3, exit Charlie 9.
Yeah, Blue Street 390, that's fine.
Blue Street 390 is, we'll plan on exiting Charlie 9.
Blue Street 390, that's right, exit Charlie 9, and, turn back on Charlie, hold short on the 23.
So was that an operational error or pilot deviation? Both crews were doing exactly what they were told to do. And it was only because the ADS-DX alarm went off that the controller realized that she had cleared 9 Delta Romeo to take off after she had cleared Blue Streak to take off. And again, I've been into Charlotte. I don't remember the runway being that curvy that the 9 Delta Romeo could not have seen the Blue Streak airplane rolling. So again, even though you've been cleared for takeoff, make sure you check both directions before you enter that runway. So I would say that was definitely an operational incident on the controller's part. Then she got tongue-tied when it was time to tell Blue Streak to review will contend to you that this could not happen today with our moving maps and the ability to have your ship self displayed. This was well before that we had iPads. Sometimes this was somewhere in the early 2000s, as I recall. And this, to fly the 757, you had to be at least 10 to 13 years at United before, as a first officer, you'd be able to fly the airplane. So a very experienced crew from the left seat, and I suspect from the right seat as well. So it's a dark and stormy night, as AOPA puts on here. And Providence, the runway configuration has closed. At the time, what you see here is taxiway Alpha. This was an active runway. This was 23 right. That's going to play a big part in the incident this night. So United lands, they're coming out over here and they're trying to get over to the gate, and it's foggy. The controller can't see anything, and unfortunately the United crew cannot see anything either.
It's a dark, foggy night in Providence. In the gloom, United 1448, a Boeing 757 has just landed on runway 5 right. Behind it, two other aircraft, a FedEx 727 and a US Air 737, are waiting to take off from the same runway. Because of the low visibility, the tower controller is relying on the pilots to report their positions on the airport.
United 1448, what's your position? We're clear of the runway on November by Bravo, United 1448. United 1448, thank you, taxi command, via taxiways November and Tango, report crossing runway 16. Okay, November, Tango will report crossing runway 16, 1448.
But the crew of United 1448 makes a mistake. Instead of continuing on November, they turn left onto taxiway Bravo and head back toward the runway they just landed on. The controller has no way of knowing this, however, and continues to clear aircraft for takeoff.
Center 2998, thank you. FedEx 1662, runway 5 right, fly runway heading, cleared for takeoff.
Runway heading, cleared for takeoff, 5 right, 1662.
Starting to sense that something isn't right, United 1448 asks the controller to verify that they're cleared to cross the runway intersection ahead of them. Assuming that the aircraft is where it's supposed to be, the controller says yes, inadvertently steering it toward an active runway.
And 1448 is on November by the runway here. We don't see the return across straight on November.
United 1448, someone's cross runway 16, doing taxiway November, Tango on the other side.
Tango on the other side, United 1448.
The United crew taxis onto runway 16 and is about to enter its intersection with runway 23 left when they get a sudden surprise.
And United 1448, we're approaching Kilo here. Somebody just took off.
United 1448, you shouldn't be anywhere near Kilo. Hold your position, please. Just stop. This is United 1448. We are currently on a runway. I was looking out to the right with a Kilo. We need to go on to the Kilo taxiway. United 1448, you were supposed to taxi November and Tango. I need to know what runway you're on. I can't see anything from the tower.
The United pilots think they're at the intersection of runways 16 and 23 right, when in fact they're at the intersection of runways 16 and 23 left. Still believing the aircraft to be safely away from the active runway, the controller continues to clear aircraft for takeoff.
Ma'am, we are on 23 right, intersection of 16, and we did not connect on November. We are by Kilo to our right, and we just overshot Kilo. We did not see it. Runway on 23 left here.
United, stand by, please. Get for 2998, runway 5 right, fly runway heading, cleared for takeoff.
Ma'am, I'm trying to advise you we're on an active runway, United 1448.
2-3 right is not an active runway. It's a taxiway when we're IFR in the dark. Here's our 2998, runway 5 right, 5 runway heading clear for takeoff.
Listening to the confusion on the radio, US Air 2998 senses that something is wrong. Despite having been cleared for takeoff twice, its crew chooses to hold their position.
Sorry, it's 2998, so we figure out what's going on down there. We're just going to stay clear of all runways.
Here's our 2998, roger. Hold short of runway 5 right. Not anywhere near the runway, but you can hold short.
Okay.
It was a wise choice. By paying attention to the big picture and staying put until the confusion was resolved, the crew of US Air 2998 prevented a second incident, one that could easily have had disastrous consequences.
So this was very similar. We could have had a Tenerife type accident right here at Providence. So I ask you, is this a pilot deviation or an operational incident? And the other thing I'd like you to consider, what was the cockpit environment on the United flight? First of all, who normally handles the radios on the ground? It's always the pilot monitors, the first officer. Captain taxis the airplane. First officer takes the radios. So the captain made the turn on Bravo mistakenly, thinking that they were crossing the runway onto Tango. So what was the crew communication like on that United flight? And then initially you hear the first officer making the calls. Then they get up to the intersection and the captain goes on the radio and starts making the radio calls. Then the first officer comes back in. So what's the division of duties on that flight deck? What's the tag on that flight deck, right? The captain just usurped the first officer, so I think the tag was probably very steep. And what type of crew communication was going on in there? And you should have confirmed the taxi clearance. And when you say I'm turning on to Bravo, that's not our clearance. The first officer should have spoken up right away and say, no, straight ahead. And if there was all that confusion when he made that turn onto Bravo, they should have stopped the airplane immediately. So maybe in the fog he didn't see it, but that was a huge mistake on the part of the United crew. Kudos to the US Air crew sitting there and having situation awareness. We call that shared situation awareness, paying attention to what's going on in the radios, and they made the wise call to not accept that takeoff clearance. And you could tell the controller was not happy that they didn't follow her instructions. But she didn't know what was going on down there either. So the US Air crew was the only one on that airfield that understood the severity of the situation. Kudos to them. starts to slow down for a second. Right. Make sure that you know all your runway signage, markings, and phraseology. That comes straight out of the AIM. We did this, the runway markings quiz a couple weeks ago. That is why I have you do this. And you should not be missing any of these questions or be confused about it, because these are going to save your bacon, keep you from getting violated, but most importantly, maybe save your life as well to understand these signage and markings. Right. On FAA.gov, runway safety, they have this placemat that you can go through, know your airport signs and markings. And I suspect this might have been a riddle airplane. This comes from the FAA Runway Safety Office. They do sterilize the call signs and in numbers, so we're not quite sure who this is. And they don't identify the airport, but some of you may recognize this if you do your cross countries to Albuquerque, that this 172 pilot is in Albuquerque. And it's about, if you're not sure what to do or you're not ready, use the word unable.
Effective communication between controllers and pilots can be improved by the mutual understanding of each other's operating environment. It also requires knowledgeable understanding of the roles and responsibilities on both sides of the mic. Air traffic controllers give instructions with the expectation that the pilot is able to understand and comply, or that the pilot will advise if they are unable to do so. But what happens when a pilot requires more preparation time, feels uncomfortable, or is not ready to comply with the instruction? All pilots must be aware that the pilot in command, PIC, of an aircraft is directly responsible for and is the final authority as to the operation of that aircraft. It is very important that pilots of all experience levels fully understand and assume their role as PIC. An air traffic controller is always prepared to repeat, provide clarification, or alternative instructions when requested. The final decision to act on ATC's instruction rests with you. If you cannot safely comply with an ATC instruction, inform them by stating unable. As stated in the Pilot Controller Glossary, unable indicates inability to comply with a specific instruction, request, or clearance. Let's analyze a replay of a real-life event involving a newly certificated private pilot, which could have been prevented by advising air traffic control they were unable. On a fall evening, a pilot of a single-engine aircraft requested to taxi. The pilot receives instructions from ATC to taxi to runway 21 at Taxiway Gulf, and to expect a 3 to 5 minute delay before a takeoff clearance would be issued. The pilot reads back the instructions correctly and exits the ramp.
Alert Gulf, 2-1.
Upon reaching the runway, the tower controller issues takeoff clearance for runway 21 at Taxiway Gulf, without the need for a 3 to 5 minute delay as previously advised.
Turn no further right than heading 260, wind 2 and 0 at 9 adjust 1 for runway 20 cross 6, takeoff. Traffic is an impact 4 miles per hour.
No further 330, 21, clear for takeoff.
No further right than 260.
No further right than 260.
Surprised by the quicker than expected takeoff clearance, the pilot felt rushed, however accepts the clearance. Instead of advising ATC, they are not ready or unable. Feeling rushed, the pilot entered the runway and turned in the wrong direction. Without verifying the compass heading prior to moving the throttle forward, they depart in the wrong direction, resulting in the aircraft not having adequate runway to reach a safe takeoff speed. The aircraft then runs off the end of the runway onto the grass.
Medevac turn right, heading, correction, continue flying straight.
Continue flying straight, Medevac.
Do you need any assistance?
What can we learn from this event? Let's take a look at what happened. The controller gave instructions to the pilot of the single-engine aircraft to depart from runway 21 at taxiway Gulf. The pilot was also told to expect a 3 to 5 minute delay prior to a takeoff clearance. The pilot planned to use the expected delay time for final preparations before taking off and was not adequately prepared to accept the takeoff clearance. Upon reaching the runway, the tower controller issues takeoff clearance without the expected 3 to 5 minute delay. The pilot was caught off guard upon receiving the takeoff clearance and became distracted as they were still preparing for departure. The pilot became disoriented and did not verify their alignment. The pilot began departure roll on the runway in the wrong direction and veered off the end of the runway onto the grass. As pilot in command, the pilot could have not accepted the takeoff clearance by replying unable to the controller upon receiving the clearance. Make sure you're also following these best practices. Stay focused. Maintain a cockpit free from distractions. Be a proactive listener. Active listening helps you to clearly understand instructions. Communicate effectively. Say what you mean, and do not just parrot back an instruction on readback. Use proper phraseology. Make sure you're speaking aviation phraseology, per the pilot controller glossary. Understand and write down the instruction. Understand runway signs, markings, and lighting. Stating unable when not prepared is your responsibility and authority as pilot in command. Remember to share these recommendations with other pilots in your community and review CFR Part 91.3 and the Pilot Controller Glossary for more information. Know before you go.
All right, and I'll add to that, anytime you are cleared for takeoff, you should say whatever the runway is verified. So runway 21 verified, what does that mean? I see runway 21. Signage for runway 21. I'm turning towards runway 21. My heading indicator shows runway 21. The compass shows runway 21. And if you have it programmed in the G1000 or the future, whatever your flight management system is, that should show that you have that runway programmed in the box. Other places we have trouble for this is where we have runway 21 left, 21 right, misprogram the box. We saw that in Philadelphia, where the first officer put in runway 27 right instead of 27 left, and they lost their V speeds. And rather than abort the takeoff at the beginning, captain elected to start the takeoff roll. Then he realized he had no V speeds and rejected the takeoff well above where he should have been, and probably totaling the airplane. Fortunately, no lives lost in that one. Failure to verify the runway was a fatal accident with a regional jet, and I believe it was Lexington, Kentucky, where there were two intersection runways. The controller missed that they were not lined up and ended up running off the end of the runway and destroying the airplane. It went into a ball of flames. So make sure that you verify might be freezing in a second. Let's see if my computer catches up here. All right, so here's taxiway Golf coming out this way, supposed to make the right turn, runway 21. Turned onto 3 through, they say, the grass, but it's all dirt. So she was very fortunate. All right, so some technology that the FAA is putting out there. We have the airport surface detection equipment, and this depends on transponders. It also uses surface loops and radar to give the controller some idea of where vehicles are moving around, airplanes and vehicles around the airport. It's installed at the 35 busiest airports across the country. We've also shown the runway status lights, and again, I think one of the biggest things is the electronic flight bag that we've got out there with the moving map that really gives a lot of situational awareness in the cockpit. Right. Double-edged sword, though. You don't need a lot of heads down sometimes when you should be looking out at the runway signage and markings. All right, so the ASDEC can detect category A and B runway incursions. Those are the close calls. Remember, we have category A, B, C, D. There is also an E, which is other uncategorized, but A was just barely missed each other, and really it's just a stroke of luck that they didn't collide. So like the Blue Streak and 9 Delta Romeo, that would be a category A. Category B, sufficient run time to avoid any type of incident, but still a serious situation. ASDEC uses the ability to track non-transponder equipped airplanes and vehicles through surface radar and induction loops, that type of thing, and aircraft flying on final approach to the airport. Right, here's our severity again. A, serious incident, which is a collision was narrowly avoided. B, in which separation decreases, there is significant potential for a collision, which may result in time-critical corrective action, evasive response to avoid a collision. Right. I mentioned the radar, sensors, and transponders. You get visual and oral warnings up in the tower cab. These are not things that are available to the aircrew. These are all ATC warnings. So they get update on the map. And here's the 35 airports that we've got. Phoenix Sky Harbor is one of them. Essentially all the big hubs around the country. And you'd think John F. Kennedy, where we just had Delta and American crossing, they've got this equipment. So just because they got the equipment doesn't mean it's foolproof. And this looks like Chicago. So you can see all the traffic moving around the taxiways coming around. This is, I believe this was taxiway Bravo. This was Charlie coming out, and runway 9 right and 9 left over on this side. Chicago's a busy place. All right. Air traffic systems, well, we know ATC control centers, TRACON, and the towers are that. So this is where the FAA is putting their technology in. And today's ATC surveillance system depends on air traffic surveillance radar that will actually physically paint airplanes. TRACON radar normally goes out to about 40 nautical miles, and after that they have to go to the center radars, which are set up to see traffic at much higher altitudes. This is all changing with space-based communications and GPS uplinks on position awareness. So I think these are the long-range radars that are up near Seligman. You may have seen them if you fly up in that area, used by Albuquerque Center. And then the surveillance radars that are down in the Phoenix area typically have only a range of 40 nautical miles. These are getting to be very old units, expensive to maintain. There's one just south of Williams, Willie Gateway at Rittenhouse, and my understanding is they're going to be decommissioning a lot of these terminal radars in the very near future because they can't keep them maintained. And then we have the surface movement radar that will detect vehicles and airplanes on the runway. Right. So pilot caused deviations, we go over this every month in my ASAC meeting, and you can see pilot deviations are lots of blue things here. So that's 2022, operational 150, other 30, pilot deviations. This was current of that, but we don't have all of 2022's data here. 2021, we had 1,033 pilot deviations. All right. Of course, FAA is trying to update all this through their NextGen modernization. If you're interested in that, you can click on that link to see how NextGen works. But I think I've got a short video here on some of it.
As an airline passenger, you may barely notice the changes taking place over the next 10 years to improve your flight. But you will appreciate the increased safety, environmental benefits, and reduced delays as the next generation air transportation system is adopted. To best illustrate the benefits of NextGen, let's first look at how your flight, say from Los Angeles to Washington, is managed today. As your plane pulls away from the gate and gets in line, your pilot is talking to controllers in the LAX tower for critical routing information. After takeoff, a TRACON controller steers the pilot through maneuvers to rise thousands of feet while covering about 100 ground miles. At about 23,000 feet, your pilot talks to another controller at Los Angeles Center, who directs the plane to its final cruising altitude of 35,000 feet. Across the country, your plane follows other planes like cars on an interstate highway. As with cars, the route is dictated by what's on the ground. Your plane must pass over radar fixes, generally not the most direct path. And every time the plane crosses an airspace boundary, your pilot changes radio frequencies more than 25 times cross-country and makes adjustments in the flight, speeding up, slowing down, and changing direction. Bad weather over, say, the Midwest will force your plane into inefficient flight paths and keep other planes on the ground, creating delays that ripple throughout the country. When your plane begins the slow descent into Washington, your pilot steps down, levels off, and speeds up, while also moving around to safely align with other traffic on the way to the runway at Dulles. Now, let's look at how NextGen will improve your flight. Improvements kick in as your plane leaves the gate. Surface traffic management on the ground makes things simpler, safer, and more orderly for both pilots and tower controllers. For one, they spend less time talking to each other on the radio. This reduces communications errors as digital data communications, similar to text messaging, expedites clearances. The order of departure is set automatically, reducing long waits and enhancing safety. As the plane heads to the runway, pilots and controllers each have a real-time GPS map of all ground traffic with such tools as ADS-B and ASDX. This greatly improves airfield safety through a reliable shared view of the plane's surroundings, particularly during bad weather. During takeoff, precision RNAV and RNP procedures allow multiple departure paths from each runway, which increases airport capacity. This same precision gets your plane quickly out of the busy lower-level airspace to cruising altitude while saving fuel. At 35,000 feet, GPS-enabled RNAV, RNP, and ADS-B allow planes to fly closer together without any loss of safety, which increases airspace capacity. Meanwhile, aircraft fly more direct paths that account for wind, destination, traffic, and weather. Weather, which now accounts for 70% of delays, becomes less of a problem. That thunderstorm over the Midwest that causes so much trouble today will be easily handled when shared network-enabled weather information is fused into decision-making tools through SWIM. Data communications, so useful in the airport, is also useful in the air, as it reduces radio frequency congestion, errors, and delays. As your plane lines up for arrival with other planes, its place in line is planned hundreds of miles in advance. Instead of the current step-down approach, tailored arrivals and then continuous descent arrivals allow a smoother descent into the airport. The more precise landing paths allow steady descent with reduced power. This cuts time, fuel, noise, emissions, and holding patterns. As your plane comes in for landing at Dulles, Data Communications relays the runway exit point, assigned gate and taxi route to the pilot, so you quickly arrive at the gate doors, exit the plane, and pick up your luggage. As a NextGen passenger, you may notice a smoother flight, but what really gets your attention is being on time more often. You also know flying is safer and more fuel efficient. And that's what matters from gate to gate.
So the FAA has great plans for NextGen. Has it been working? looking in the sky, it puts pressure even on their next generation programs. So the backbone of this automatic dependent surveillance broadcast, we see the effects of that just with having to have ADS-B in our airplanes. And you can see how just in our local area, using ADS-B does increase situational awareness and your awareness of airplanes that are around you, whether they could be a conflict as you're out in the practice areas. I know I look at it quite a bit when I'm out in the practice area, but there is a double-edged sword. Sometimes students spend way too much time looking down at their iPads in traffic where they need to be looking outside the window, right? Then we've got the collaborative air traffic management technologies, a whole bunch of things like they were talking there about SWIM. That's kind of like a wide area network that allows a lot of data to be passed throughout the country on the positions of awareness and using data communication, CPDLC. And my understanding now that everywhere in the country can log on to CPDLC, and I wouldn't be surprised to see it come down into our cockpits quite soon as you can get that technology. They're not limiting it to just Part 121 and Part 135 operators. So we may be getting our clearances very soon through CPDLC. And of course, the National Airspace Voice System, two people talking on the same radio at the same time, and it blocks each other out. So this CPDLC, it proves that, but there's also technologies out there for allowing voice communications to not be clobbered by each other. And we need to have that type of system very quickly here. And then we did talk about SWIM. Network backbone, like I said, is kind of like a wide area network for all this technology that they have out there. And then the NextGen weather radar, we see the benefits of that right here on our iPads with what we can get information on weather radar and being able to look way out in advance and see real-time weather besides just what the crew is seeing on their weather radar that might be depicting storms maybe 100 to 200 miles out. And the limitation with that is as you get closer and closer to the storm, it gets better resolution. But when it's 200 miles out, there's a couple things. Your radar beam gets dispersed, so you don't get a true picture of the intensity of cells. And the other thing is there's curvature of the Earth. So if you're looking out 200-300 miles on the radar beam, all you're seeing are the very tops of those very far distant storms. So you really don't have a good idea of the intensity. But now with NextGen, NextRad weather radar in the cockpit, we can see exactly what those cells are doing. And you can make much better decisions. Well, should we go left? Should we go right? And a lot of times ATC has those things as well at their disposal that they will work with you where we didn't have those capabilities. So CPDLC, both en route and pre-departure, and they mentioned it's like text messaging. So you do a lot of things through the keyboard. You get pretty fast at moving your fingers across that keyboard. So in the beginning, this is probably one of the biggest frustrations that new first officers have are data entry using ACARS and CPDLC, but you do pick it up. All right, so some of the benefits of that: reduce communications time between controllers and pilots. They want to say rerouting around weather and congestion, flexibility, and enable next-gen initiatives and trajectory-based means being able to go direct. So faster, more efficient. They like to throw in environmental and, of course, safety. Right. So the whole route goes through there. And let's see what, oh, yes, San Francisco. Another was not a dark and stormy night. This was a very clear night. And you may have heard about this. Air Canada, for some reason, they're using, instead of taxiway on the right side, they're over here on the, San Francisco always feels messed up. It's actually the north and south, but they're landing 28. So all the airplanes are out here. I believe this is taxiway Charlie that they're using out there. So watch Air Canada and watch how the tails get lit up from the landing lights. Air Canada is lined up on the taxiway, not on the runway. See his light reflecting off the bay. They missed that second airplane maybe by about 10 feet. We'll watch it one more time. I have no idea what that Air Canada crew was looking at and how they could possibly not see all those airplanes that were lined up on the taxiway, particularly when they're getting ready to flare. They're almost in the flare position, and they initiate a go-around. They tried to, by the time they thought about getting the cockpit voice recorder, the airplane had already flown back towards Canada, and that data had been lost. So why that crew messed up, I think it was part fatigue, unfamiliarity with San Francisco. It is a special qualification airport, but that is no excuse for what happened that night with Air Canada, right? All right, that's the end of this module. So some of you may have just gone through this. I think it feels more like Thanksgiving, going to Sunday lunch at Grandma's, coming back from Sunday lunch after being Grandma's. And of course, unfortunately, that AN-224 is no longer with us. It's a casualty of the Ukrainian war with Russia. So they have vowed to rebuild, and I've seen pieces of it. They've got it pretty well taken apart, and they'll be able to spare parts, maybe piece it back together. Kind of sad to see a one-of-a-kind airplane that is burned out. Reminds me of when I was in Kuwait, seeing burned out 747s and DC-9s on the runway there in front of the terminal that just burned to the ground. Looks very similar to what I saw in Kuwait.